I'm speaking to Chris Wood, who is an ex-resident and works in admissions at
Yeldall.
Yeldall. And Yeldall is a place, Yeldall Manor is a residential drug and alcoholic recovery centre. It's near Reading and it's for men struggling with addiction. And they're a healing community with a holistic approach and also a centre, a sustainable Christian recovery. That's really amazing. Good morning, Chris, or good afternoon. I keep on saying good morning. Good day to you. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm in good form. And
Mhm.
you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I'm so grateful that you're going to spend some time with us today, finding out more as we find more about what goes on at Yeldle Manor. When I met you at the CRE exhibition, I was so taken aback. I've been telling everybody, and you come up in lots of different conversations because I think just to have something that like that facility is just excellent.
Yeah.
So. I just want to just say now you said you're an ex-resident. Now am I
Yeah.
assuming that you were also an addict or an alcoholic?
Yeah. We use the word substances. It just covers the whole range of things from, cocaine and heroin and ketamine and alcohol. There's no distinction between somebody who medicates themselves with alcohol or somebody who medicates themselves with heroin.
Mm-hmm.
So, we just use the word substances. Yeah, I did the
Right.
program in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
I came off the streets of Newcastle upon Tyne and came to Yeldall slightly drunk, has to be said. We can't do that nowadays. We've got much more officialdom in place. But I walked through the door on April the 2nd, 2007, and the hairs on my arms are doing it now. They stood on end, and I felt at home for the first time in 20, 25 years.
Oh my goodness. That's so deep because obviously the alcohol that shows that it's not that you were just covering up some deep hurts.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So, and how did you find the place or how did you hear about it?
Um, right. Well, I come from not huge amounts of wealth, but a relatively well-off family and public school, and I know who my parents are. I am not the stereotype of an addict that most people would associate with addiction at all. Um, I had jobs, I earned lots of money, I had girlfriends. Apparently, I'd even had a wife that I had to be reminded about when I got counselling. I'd drunk myself so into such a stupor that I'd forgotten that. Um, I had detoxed for the fourth time in Newcastle upon Tyne, where I come from, and I had somebody give me a piece of paper, and I'd done what I normally do when I leave detox. I walked out and went to the pub, got a few drinks, went to the off license, got some more, and I didn't really understand then, and this is where a lot of people don't either, that I was medicating myself for traumas. I don't have any nasty traumas in my background, but every human being has got stuff. Anyway, I had a flat that I was cuckooed in. For those of you who don't know, that basically means it's taken over by drug dealers. So I didn't spend any time there, and I was on the streets. I felt this piece of paper in my pocket, and I rang the number. I had a bit of credit on my phone, and I got through to the drug and alcohol team in a suburb of Newcastle upon Tyne. And within a very short space of time, they'd given me an assessment. I had a telephone assessment with Yeldall Manor, still not really knowing what it was. And within, I think, 2 weeks of actually that phone call, I was walking through the door of Yeldall. It was much easier in those days. There was money in the system, and we dealt with social workers and people who really understood what addiction was all about and the needs that needed to be met. So it's all a little bit of a drunken blur, to be honest, but I still remember walking through the door and how that felt. And I come from a nice family. My parents are nice people. They're not horrible anyway. I've not been abused. I went to Newcastle Royal Grammar School. I did all sorts of things. But we come into addiction from any number of different roads. And you can ask me a bit later if you like. I'll tell you how I got to mine. So
Mhm. So from the outside, to some people, you would have a perfect life. really.
Absolutely. I used to earn lots and lots of money. Was able to
And you
I
went,
was able to do all sorts of jobs. I played a lot of tennis. My father played at Junior Wimbledon. We were brought up with tennis and squash and all these kind of things. I played rugby to a high standard. I drove nice cars, had girlfriends, had lots of money, seemed what the dream would be.
mhm,
It was only really when I came to Yeldall and discovered really what I was feeling, which is I didn't like the feelings I had, the
mhm,
insecurities, the pain, but I didn't actually also understand those traumas or those pains either. And that's part of the problem for a lot of men, which is more my area of expertise than addiction for ladies, but I know a bit about that. Men are conditioned too, where the protectors, where the earners, where the family men, we're not allowed to show emotion, we can't cry, where, all of this kind of stuff. And actually, we are just as emotional as our lady counterparts, etc. We have just the same amount of feelings, but we don't know how to process them, and
mhm,
we don't know how to understand them. And it's that's where we need the counselling. That's where we need groups, where we also need to be with like-minded others.
mhm.
Yeldall is a men-only rehab. It was partly chosen for me because I used to also fix my feelings with women. You can hear I've got quite a distinctive voice, which affects some women, not all of them, but it does affect them. And I used it devastatingly. All
Oh,
right. And you can see me. I'm obviously as good looking as George Clooney. I'm tired of him ringing me up all the time. So I make jokes about it because one of my deepest insecurities was feeling ugly.
wow.
All right. So there's all sorts that goes on. So my journey is not typical because there is no typical journey into addiction. Everybody is unique and different,
Mhm,
unique and different in so many wonderful ways. One thing I'm absolutely convinced of, though, that everybody who really does want to get into recovery, not just abstinence, not just not using drink or drugs, but active recovery, at some point in their stupor, gets down on their hands and knees and says, God, if you exist, I can't do this anymore. I need your help. And I'm very confident that I did that. And in my job at admissions, when I speak to people, they say quite often, yeah, I would have done that. Or I had an experience, or I met somebody who said, you should do this. And it's amazing how God will influence and come across you. So that piece of paper in my pocket that I took no notice of that somebody put in had that one telephone number on that I was prompted to ring.
saved your life.
That is what got me into recovery.
Yeah. And at the time that they welcomed you, did they, at what point did you sort of accept Jesus or start to learn about God?
Oh, I'm a grandiose alcoholic. I go to public school, don't you know? I don't believe in any of that kind of rubbish. I can keep a hold of it. I'm strong. I'm a man.
Mm,
Um, so for the first 3 months, I was quite close-minded, as a lot of addicts are, because we're scared. We're frightened. We don't want to show feelings. We don't want to show emotions because it's weak.
mhm,
And we have not a huge amount of overt Christianity at Yeldall. We don't ram it down anybody's throats. God is a bit more powerful than us, and he does his own work here. But we do have 3 sessions during the week that are overtly Christian. And after a little while, one or two of the other residents said, come on, Chris, you've got a brain. Try and open your heart as well and start thinking about this. Because the disease of addiction, which is a disease, it's recognized by the World Health Organization, is both spiritual and emotional.
mhm,
We use and medicate ourselves on our emotions, and we feel spiritually completely broken, unlovable, unwantable, useless, no gifts, no talents, not worth anything.
mm,
So where the spiritual side of things comes, this is where you've got to open your heart, not just your brain, is you've got to allow love in. So I was filled with bitterness and shame and guilt and resentment. But coming to Yeldall, meeting the staff, meeting the guys who are already on the program, allowing them to love me,
mhm,
actually allowing people in. And
mm,
that started to fill me up with good stuff. And as you fill up with the good stuff, the bad stuff comes out.
mhm,
So that's the spiritual side. Emotionally, and I can only speak for blokes here, but we tend to, because we hold on to everything. We don't know how to let go. We end up with a kind of steel wool ball of hot burning cancer in the depths of our, in the midriff, etc. We don't know what to do with it. So to extinguish it and temporarily put it out, we go and use drugs. We go and drink. We have sex, find porn, gamble, do all sorts of any number of different things to
Have
numb
a
and to
fight.
medicate what we're doing.
Or have a
Hmm?
fight, like sometimes
Yeah, or have a fight. Yeah, all sorts because we're
anger.
all angry.
Mm.
But most of the anger is actually directed at ourselves because we don't understand ourselves.
Hmm.
So when you come to Yeldall especially, but rehabs, what they're doing is they're helping you through the counseling and the groups to slowly tease out and pull out these painful emotions, feelings, memories. A lot of them are false. A lot of the things that you tell yourself again and again, they're a lie, but
Mm.
you come to believe them.
Yeah.
And it's painful coming out, but it's coming out. And
Hmm.
you're in a safe, secure environment to be able to allow you to do that.
Mm.
Um, and it's really fantastic. So I went through the first 3 months, getting back to your question, sorry, keeping my head closed, keeping my mind closed, and then I started to open it out. And on June the 24th, at about 7:30 in the evening, at a church in Bracknell, I met Jesus Christ.
Wow. And
I know he exists.
mm, that's wonderful. And then I guess after that, it's history, isn't it? Did you
It
did
is then.
did you board? Did you board
Oh
in
yes, it's residential. It's residential.
residential? Right.
With an addiction as deeply ingrained as mine, you need to be away from society, from family. Not like a prison. It's not a prison at all. It's a very beautiful place, lovely old building, 40 acres of grounds. But you need to get away from everything that triggers you, everything that you're ashamed of, everything you're embarrassed about, to work upon yourself. You have to treat it as I'm carrying a cancer, I'm carrying a really horrible disease that is treatable, that can be beaten. I know not everybody makes it. Cancer takes people. Cancer took my sister, sadly, from pancreatic cancer. Um, but people can recover also.
Mm.
And the idea is that you fill yourself properly with the love of God, the love of your fellow man, and most importantly, to start with, start loving yourself,
Hmm.
start liking yourself. Once you accept Jesus loves you, then you've also got to say, come on, if I love you, why don't you love yourself?
Hmm.
So you start to explore, why do I feel ugly? Actually, I'm not. Why do I feel rejected? Why am I ashamed of myself? And all of these things. And there are some things that we've done. We've done some really bad stuff.
Mm.
Okay. But actually, we can make amends for a lot of it, or we can accept that we've done those things. We have to accept we take responsibility for it, but we stop it hanging over our head for the
Yeah.
rest of our lives.
So you accept when obviously you get Jesus in your life, it's a clean slate. And
Yeah.
how easy was that to say, no, it's a clean slate?
Actually, in my instance, for me, because I physically met him, it was so easy. It
Mm.
was the most euphoric, inexplicable feeling ever that any human being could ever experience, as far as I'm concerned. I've never taken heroin, but heroin users say that's pretty spectacular when you take it, etc. But for me, it was everything, and I felt all the weight, all the guilt, all the shame lifted off my shoulders. Doesn't mean to say that I didn't still have work to do on myself. I still had to get an understanding, etc. But knowing that love was monumental.
Mm.
Too big to explain, to be honest. You have to experience it for yourself.
Hmm. So, I mean, it's wonderful. So sometimes we can be kind of judgmental when we walk past alcoholics or drug users on the street. And you said something really when I met you, because I've got a pastor actually used to be an addict, and he got saved. He was at the curb at his lowest point, and he heard Jesus calling out his name, and he says, "Who's
Okay.
that?" And then he says, so that's how he got saved. He's now a pastor. He runs a Bible school, but he was saying because there's two schools of thought. I said, when you walk past someone, I feel this immense guilt. And should we give them money? Because someone else says you shouldn't give them money. He said, look, I used to make up any kind of story to try and get money to have a fix. And then when I asked you, you said to me, "Why? Just give them a drink, or just give them because it's not what they're taking it for a 5 minute healing from the trauma that's caused
Yeah.
them to want to drink in the first place." And that I just looked at it a completely different perspective, I won't give obviously go around giving drugs and alcohol out.
Absolutely
And
not.
realize actually, yeah, they drank not because they want to, because there's a deeper issue
Yeah.
here as to why they're drinking, and they're probably so beyond it and numb. And you know, it's like someone else. We've got a psychologist, and she says, "Are you numb? Are you healed, or are you numb?"
Yeah.
And we
Big
have,
difference.
yeah, so, and that was
Yeah.
just, you know, I guess these people have spent so much time in the art of numbing their feelings that coming to rehab, it must be really painful because then you've got to bring up all that trauma or feelings again. So
And
it's
yes, it is, but
the tears,
you do it in a controlled way.
right?
You know, your counselor is going to take you through whatever it is. I'm not a counselor, but you know, they're highly trained, etc. They're going to take you through your steps to healing. You know, I didn't understand really why I drank. I really didn't. I had no idea. I had no traumas. You can imagine the kind of traumas that some people suffer in life. I had no idea until I started working in admissions how many little boys are sexually abused. I had no idea. I always associated it's bound to be little girls.
Mm,
50% of our guys at any one time, that's my guess, at any one time, whether they tell you or not, because it's such a deeply suppressed and hidden thing for both sexes, they've been traumatized. Now, that's an obvious trauma. That is something that they're really, really, you know, hiding from. They can't bear to think about it. You get somebody like me, who knows his family and knows his parents and all that kind of stuff. But when I got counseling, I I've got this big distinctive voice. I was always loud. I'm spontaneous and I'm creative and noisy and full of life. What I remember, rightly or wrongly, from my childhood was be quiet, Christopher. Shut up, Christopher. And that's probably a false memory, but it made me feel not acceptable. It made me feel rejected. And it's only when I got the counseling that I realized that was it. My dad is a really nice guy. He's a lovely bloke. He's kind, considerate, compassionate. I think somewhere actually deep inside his soul, he's got a real faith in God as well, although he wouldn't probably admit it. And he's a nice guy, but he wasn't a great dad to me because he didn't meet my needs. He,
mm,
you know, physically, we had everything. I went to the public school he taught at before he started doing the tennis club. We had wonderful clothes and all sorts of different things. But I was kind of scared of him, which is a little bit of a shame. And also, I wanted his time. I wanted his attention, which is what sons want. They want time with their dads. And dad is great. I've got a great relationship with him now.
mm-hmm.
When I got clean and when I got properly into recovery, I had to acknowledge that my father, his dad was an alcoholic. His
Oh,
brother's an alcoholic. His great uncles were alcoholics. And my father built up walls around himself to protect his own heart and his spirit from those kind of things. Now, he was never abused either, but living with an alcoholic father is not a nice place to be. You
mm,
know, so you get a deeper and deeper understanding of it. So we've got an alcoholic in every generation going back to 1700 and something. So if you want to talk about generational sin or generational
yeah.
whatever you want to describe it as, you know, in our family, it's there.
Mm,
You know, it's a propensity to use alcohol.
mm-hmm,
I come from the northeast of England. It's the drinking capital of Europe. My grandfather was in the Royal Navy back in the
mm-hmm.
1930s, 40s, and 50s, plus as rum. You know, it's part of the culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things.
Mm,
Um, and anybody who's listening to this, every single one of them knows an addict.
mm,
Every single one of them has got somebody in their family at some point who is an addict,
mm,
whether or not they know they are, because heroin, alcohol, crack, ketamine, all of these things, it becomes really obvious.
mm,
But gambling doesn't until the whole house has disappeared. Sex doesn't. Porn doesn't. But actually, they're all obsessive, compulsive things that we have no control over.
mm,
And this is why it's such an insidious disease. You
mm-hmm,
know, it affects so many people.
mm,
The alcohol and the drugs, etc., it's just more obvious.
mm. So
Um,
you get, is there such a thing as that you experience or other people experience called cold turkey? You know
oh
that
yes, I mean,
expression.
yeah. So I
Where
mean,
you have
that's
to go
more.
through the
That's
sweats and all of the
yeah.
physical.
That's normally applied to coming off things like heroin.
Mm.
All right. Heroin is not nice to come off at all. You will go cold turkey because you're basically turkey because your skin goes all pimply and you
Oh,
sweat and
right. Okay.
it's not pleasant. If you want to see a good example of it, if you watch A cat named Bob.
Okay. Oh, I saw that. I love that
Yeah,
film.
yeah. Okay, so watching him go through, he portrayed it
Yeah.
extremely well. A
Mm,
heroin addict will feel like he's dying.
mm,
He won't actually die. In my case, I drank so much that if I just stopped, I would almost certainly die
mm.
because my body would go into shock. Um, so yes, there's different ways
So did
of
they
it.
allow, did they obviously know that
Well,
medically?
I came
So,
here after not drinking huge amounts because I was on virtually on the streets. I had very little money, so I wasn't drinking that much.
mm.
I still arrived. We couldn't do it nowadays. Everybody has to come here totally clean and sober for good therapeutic reasons and medical reasons. So I rattled a bit for a couple of days, and
You've gone
yeah,
quiet. Yeah,
I
that's
didn't like it, but I got through it. But
so. Sorry,
I
if they've got to come to you, sorry to interrupt. If they've got to come to you clean and sober, how
yeah,
to get that point? Is there sort of a link, a bridge before? Is that something
yeah,
to do with you, or is
yeah.
it?
Well, it is. We will help people. So we are a charity that is here to heal people from their addictions. We're not a medical unit. We're not a hospital. We're a CQC registered rehab, which is where means we're a proper care home.
Mhm.
The difference is if we start trying to do detoxes, we start then having to have doctors, nurses, psychiatrists. We're a little charity. We've got a huge following, and we save hundreds of lives, etc., through the decades. But we just can't afford that kind of thing. So people will advise them where to go. There's always a cost attached. We encourage every man he has to go and work with his local drug and alcohol team wherever you are, and quite often they can pay for a detox. It's quite interesting. A lot of people mix up rehab with detox. People don't quite understand all the differences. So the detox is to safely help you withdraw from the effects of alcohol,
Mhm.
heroin, etc.
And then I
Um,
guess the rehab is to maintain the cleanliness, the cleanness.
Yeah, and it's not just about being clean. I mean, that's what most people think, and it is important. It's important never to use again because all you're going to do is just take yourself straight back into it. I can't have one drink.
Oh, really?
I may be able to.
So
I
do you
might
never
be
ever
able
go
to.
to the pub, or what about if you go to a restaurant, it sells alcohol?
Oh,
Does it
that's fine.
smell?
That takes practice.
Mm,
It takes practice of not doing silly things, not putting yourself in danger, not taking risks, having accountability, which is a massive one. So making real friends, not drinking buddies, not dealers, that kind of thing. Reconnecting with your own family, and learning that it's okay to be scared or frightened. So if I was to walk down the street even 17 years later and I got a craving to go into that pub, I would phone my wife, I'd phone my boss, I would phone any number of different people immediately. And as soon as you tell somebody, the devil flees, the
right.
power out of it goes. But
Mm,
a relapse actually starts. It's nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. It's about how you feel about yourself.
mm,
If you start to feel I'm not worth anything. I'm useless. I'm rubbish. My relationships are crap. I'm not doing what I need to do properly, or yeah, any number of different things. So that's when your relapse starts. Picking up the drink or the needle is the end result when you start medicating the feelings again.
mhm.
Um, there's a phrase in AA that one is too many and a thousand's not enough.
Mm,
So, I can't afford, and I wouldn't risk it. I don't know. Why do I want to numb my feelings?
mm.
I'm a human being. Most of the time, I'm pretty happy, pretty chirpy guy.
Yeah.
I've got a job that I absolutely adore, but I actually come across a huge amount of stress that goes with it. Some of the stories I hear, some of the people I meet, their stories are absolutely heartbreaking,
Mm,
and some of the crimes that they've committed, etc., under the influence, etc. And there's a lot of people out there suffering because of it.
mm,
So that would be any excuse. I could make any excuse to go and get a drink,
mm.
but my boss would kill me. He's on the other side of the desk here because she's my best
Mhm.
friend. My
Oh,
wife would kill me.
oh.
My boss's husband would kill me. There's a long line of people. If I ever
So what
picked
you
up,
have to lose is far greater than that one
oh,
drink.
absolutely, absolutely. And I just don't want to go back to it. Why would I risk what I've got
Mm-hmm.
for a drink?
So
It's just not worth it.
when they've finished their program there, what happens? Are they become Christians or they just hit? What's the normal state of how they are
So
spiritually and mentally and emotionally?
So what we do at Yeldor, we're quite unique in this. We're a very long program. So guys will spend 24 weeks in this main house where I am at the moment, with a structure, with groups, with counseling, work on the land, work in the kitchens, and slowly moving through, gaining some objectives and moving on through the program, learning a huge amount about themselves and about recovery. And then for me to go back to Newcastle, I have no job, no house. My relationships are better, but they're still not fixed. I'd just crash.
Mm.
So we have a lodge on the grounds where the guys go into, and it's semi-independent living, and they stay there for 12 to 24 weeks. They're much more independent. They're buying their own food. We find voluntary work that they want to do, and they go out and do that. And then we have a variety of other move-on housing that they can take if they want. If they're married and they need to go back, we'll help them go back. We'll help them put things in place. What's going to keep you safe? What are you going to avoid? You know, all this kind of thing. So it's a long program for a reason. It's to help deeply entrenched men in addiction get their lives, get recovery, not just abstinence. You can go to detox and get clean from alcohol or heroin, but being in active recovery is a totally different thing. It's actually enjoying life and having fun with life.
And stopping the
Two
reason
hours.
why you wanted to drink or take the drugs in the first place, I guess.
You've got to find out all of those things, because, as I say, I didn't drink that much, 2 liters of vodka a day, because I was happy. It didn't bring me anything apart from numbed it out and stop me from rattling and shaking.
Mm.
Heroin addicts end up having to inject themselves in the most obscure places of their bodies, etc., because their veins collapse. They don't get a hit, they don't get high from it. All they do is just stop feeling ill and stop feeling sick.
Okay.
So the length of the program is reflected in a guy who arrived here for his first day at Yeldall, straight from prison. He spent over 20 years in prison. I know his childhood story, which was absolutely horrendous. It was absolutely appalling. He got a 2.5 year sentence tariff, and he spent 17 years in prison.
Oh.
That's what our society does to people who are sick and ill.
Mm.
We need to give people who are coping with traumas, whether they're big or small, whether they're known or not, we need to give everybody grace of God. We need to try and understand them. There's got to be consequences for actions. There always is. Jesus loves me to bits, but he's a hard taskmaster.
Mm.
Yeah, I know when I'm doing something wrong, you know, but he loves me nevertheless. We've got to show that to everybody. And addiction is the biggest disease in the country, bar none.
Mm.
There are so many addicts. Not everybody on the street is an addict, but the vast majority are.
Mm.
A huge number, the vast majority of people in prison because of drugs and alcohol.
Mm.
Most of them are traumatized. Most of them have mental health issues.
Mm.
It's trying to change the whole view. My Bible knowledge is rubbish. All right, I'm not brilliant. I can't quote you and all this kind of stuff. But to my knowledge, Jesus doesn't just, he doesn't come here to say hi to the good guys and all that kind of stuff. He goes deliberately to the leper, to the woman at the well, etc., and all of these kind of things. And he's going there to heal the sick.
Mm.
And that's what we need to do. We need to actually open our eyes and hearts to people and actually say, what is wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
And encourage them to talk and to be open and honest about themselves and to get a life. However, not everybody's going to get the perfect life. But if you're using drink and drugs, you are only going to end up in the depths of despair and misery.
Mm-hmm. And it's expensive, you know.
It's expensive all round. One of my colleagues just did some figures. And if you include prison and probation and social services and family services, addiction costs £46 billion a year.
Wow.
£46 billion a year. And we build more prisons, we build more prison
Yeah.
wings, etc. Our services get more and more depleted. If you go to A&E any night of the week, the vast majority of people going in there are there because of drug and alcohol related issues.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science trying to help people get well.
So,
And
do you get that support from the government, or are they still catching on?
it's getting very slightly better. We have to hope, because there's been a recent change of government, that this one will continue. It's the blunt answer is no. We don't, or the industry doesn't. Over the past 10 years, 200 rehabs have shut because of lack of funding. So now that there's a bit of funding in the system, there's just nowhere near enough rehabs.
Mm.
My boss, my colleague, and I, on a daily basis, having to turn people away or say the waiting list is, if you've got some funding, 3 to 4 months. We have a charity that can fund people who can't get funding, and we can have 7 out of our 21 guys here on that charity. We're totally unique like that. But our next available bed through the Good Samaritan Fund is not until October, November next year
Right.
because we're oversubscribed. So the answer is there are nowhere near the number of facilities. There's nowhere near the resources in community. There's nowhere near enough information and accurate information for addicts and family to go and get the help that they deserve and need. And come back to media,
Mm.
people's popular belief about what addicts are and who they are, etc. That needs to change. Needs to
So,
change hugely.
so in a perfect world, sorry, I'm going to ask you a few more questions. In a perfect world, if you had all the money in the world, or you had someone say, "Look, I'll give you anything you want," what would you do as part of your expansion? Would you build? Would you extend your actual building to?
No, no, absolutely not. Because when you're an addict, you're totally alone. You don't feel part of anything. Even if you've got a loving family around you, you just retreat within inside yourself. Your soul and your spirit shrivels up to, you know, a minuscule, a mustard seed. It's still there, but it shrivels away. So we have 21 beds.
Right.
We don't really want to get any bigger than that. We would build other rehabs around the country
Basically,
based on
that's
the
what I was
same
going to ask you.
model.
Yeah. So,
So a very good example is I wasn't here 15, 20 years ago. A doctor from Egypt came to visit Yeldon
mm,
because he wanted to do something about addiction in Egypt.
mm,
And he has built up 2,500 beds based on Yeldon in Egypt,
wow.
Christian rehabs.
Oh, that's amazing.
So
Amazing, because
we
I'm
would love
assuming
to
all
build.
Egyptians are Arab, so I didn't even know Christians lived in Egypt. So
Yeah,
that's
they do. Yeah, there's a big Christian community, etc. So um, it's a, it's about loving people better, and you can't do that if we had 100 people here.
mm,
We can't know them by name.
no.
Jesus knows us all by name, doesn't he? All
Mm,
right, so he's got to know the name. You've got to know the idiosyncrasies. We're all wonderfully and uniquely made, and they're all a pain when they're here because they're going through huge transformation and change. But they're lovely and they're wonderful and they're
but
amazing.
do they keep in touch with you?
Oh, a lot of the guys do. Most, not all, but most guys who've got a successful recovery, even if they move to the far side of the world, will stay in touch with Yeldon. This
Mm,
becomes home for so many people. And then, for instance, I moved down from the northeast. You know, Northumberland's a beautiful, wonderful county, etc. When I made my life down here because I wanted to keep in touch with the place that saved my life.
mm.
And if I feel God, I go to church, go to cathedrals, go to all these places. I don't feel God's present anywhere near as much as I do when I come to Yeldon. He's absolutely, palpably, tangibly here all the time.
Mm.
It's a wonderful feeling.
And you're in action. You know, it's an active thing you're doing in
It is. I
love.
mean,
Love is a doing word, isn't it? And you're obviously it seems like you're all showing these people real, pure love, and
yeah. And
that
it quite often it has to be disciplined. We don't always have to be nice about it. If you want to get well, then you're going to have to do the washing up. Sorry, mate. Right? It's there's so many different facets to it, but we've got a really good success rate. If you take a maybe a 5 or 6 years to allow for the peaks and troughs, etc., 80% of the guys make it through the first stage in the main house, 80% of the guys in the lodge, and 80% are clean and sober a year later.
mm,
Um, and it's through love, it's through understanding, it's through compassion. There's a terrific amount of professional counseling and groups. There's a routine. There's awesomely good food. Eating 3 meals a day. You've got running hot water all the time. You're in beautiful surroundings. You're mixing with men who, whilst we have different stories, we all share the same. We're all addicts,
mhm,
and that's such a great leveler.
mm.
It's great. Um,
Last question I was going to ask you is so there's a few things. So how can people donate if they want to donate? You said there's a charity to help. Obviously, you're a charity, and there's also a charity arm to help people that can't afford the rehab. I'm going to ask you
Yep.
that, and I'm going to ask you another question after that.
Okay. So go to the website if you want to contribute to a man going through the program. It is the Good Samaritan Fund.
Mhm.
If you want to contribute, it's a beautiful old building, but it's falling down around our ears. So if you've got skills, or if you wanted to donate, physical stuff, then call us and tell us about it. The roof is going to cost £1 million to
Mhm.
repair. Okay, um, so it or just give us a call.
What do you mean about skill? What, can you just elaborate? What do you mean if they've got
Well, I mean, for instance,
psychologist or
we get
counselor?
people who want to come and volunteer. They've had experience of addiction, or they've got family and friends who have made it or not made it, and they want to come and work alongside the guys,
Mhm.
or they want to provide clothing, or they will come and give lifts
Mhm.
to AA meetings, to church, etc. There's all sorts of ways that you can contribute. Somebody might be as a land surveyor, for example, and we got 40 acres. Now there's footprints here, so can we actually build there? Now we don't want to build any more residential stuff, but we could do with some more buildings. What could we do? People's expertise, people's time, people's love
Mhm.
is really what it comes down
And you're
to.
Reading, aren't you? Near Reading, you're Reading or
Between Reading and Maidenhead, yeah, although you wouldn't know it,
Twyford?
it's so peaceful.
Twyford?
Twyford, that's right, that's the nearest village. That's a 15-minute downhill cycle ride and an hour cycle back.
Yeah.
Because it's uphill. Um,
And if the other question and final question I was going to ask you, thank you so much. I know that thank you for spending so much time with us. It's just fascinating and just incredible to know there's people like you and your ministry at Yeldhall Manor.
yeah,
Um,
well done.
yeah, if I saw someone walking past on the street and I thought I'd love to tell them about you, can I give them your details, or what's the best thing to do to help
I
them
think
rather than
in
just
many respects, it's saying, do you want to get well? Do you how do you feel about how your life is at the moment?
wow.
That there are potential ways. So again, and all you Bible people who know much more than I, but Jesus doesn't just walk up and touch the leper and says, you're healed, and wander off. He asks him, what do you want? Are you willing? you know, and that's what we got, because nobody's going to beat addiction unless they want to change.
Mm,
So it's actually getting alongside somebody and saying, what's your issues? Talk to me.
mm,
Maybe give some examples of your own, because we've all had stuff happen:
mm,
bereavements, abuse, witnessed domestic violence, been in a car crash, and I'm not going through the nasty stuff, but there's so many things. Give examples. I coped with it by going to play squash, or
mm,
I run, obsessively, or whatever it might be, eating, gambling, all these different things. So talk to them and just say, do you want to get well? And if you do want to get well, have you ever thought about rehab? And
mm,
if you have, then call these people,
mhm,
you know, and we have to give the advice. You have to go to your drug and alcohol team. We need information. We need to understand you. We need to make sure that we're right for you. Then none of them are wrong. They're all fine. It's,
mm,
can we provide the help that they need here at Yeldall? And if we can't, we will suggest other places we think that might work for them.
mhm. Well,
Showing people love and understanding.
mm. Well, I'm speaking to Chris Wood, who works in admissions in Yeldhall Manor in Reading, which is amazing place, as you can hear. The website, what can you just tell us what the website is?
www.yeldall.org. So it's YELDALL. It's quite a mouthful to say. Nearly everybody gets it wrong. So
Mhm.
it's www.yeldall.org.
Mhm. And can I just ask one last question? Do you
Fire
go
away.
out to churches and train churches at all in how this?
It's something we would love to do with training, but we certainly go and give talks. And if people want advice, we get asked a lot of questions. How do you apply love? It can sometimes be really difficult. Now, I'm not a father, I'm not actually a parent at all, but we get so many phone calls here from distressed mums and dads, especially mums. And the mums are trying to love their addict son better, and the dads are trying to fix them. And neither of those things work, because actually you're not talking to your son, you're talking to the addict. And sometimes the love that you have to give is to withdraw the comforts, to withdraw shelter. to withdraw food, to withdraw money. Not all the time, but it's also putting boundaries in place and sticking to it.
Mm.
And if you're a mum and your son breaks that boundary and he uses heroin in the house, you have to kick him out.
Mm.
Where's he going to go? It's cold, it's wet. What's going to happen? But if you continue to allow, if you continue to feed the addict will take, take, take. You've got to feed your son or your daughter or your husband or your wife or your cousin, whoever it is. You've got to feed them with love. I love you,
Mm.
but I am not putting up with this. And a lot of it is so difficult to do. And again, we've got to get the addict into a headspace where actually I want to live. I can see a light at the end of the tunnel. My life doesn't have to be like this.
Mm.
Not everybody believes that. Not everybody thinks like that.
Mm.
That's why alcohol is the biggest killer in the country.
Yeah. It's the worst thing when they accept that that's their portion and that's their
Yeah,
part of their life.
I did. That's what I felt like until God put that piece of paper with a telephone number in my pocket.
Well, thank God for your life. Look what he's doing now. And you have such an amazing voice. We need to use that voice for UGN Jams. So I'm going to be coming to you afterwards. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Chris, thank you so much for spending so much time with us.
It's been a
And
great pleasure.
yeah, and if you want to get in touch with Chris, have you got an email that people can contact you on at all as
Yeah.
well?
Admissions at yeldall.org.uk.
Thank you. God bless and have a great
Thank
week.
you. And you.